Welcome everyone to the Kimberlite webinar to take a comprehensive look at the G&G software market and the digital and technology trends. My name is David Vatt. I'm the president of Kimberlite Research, and I'm glad that you're able to join us today. This is the 18th in the Kimberlite webinar series that we've been conducting. Our past webinars have included reviews of many of the oilfield products and services most commonly used in the industry, such as formation evaluation services like open hole wireline logging, logging while drilling, mud logging, drilling services like mud motors, measurement while drilling, rotary steerables and bits, artificial lift, cementing, surface wellhead, subsea, and others. If you or your colleagues would like access to any one of our previous webinars, please send us an email or a chat message today. Today, we'll be taking a deep dive into the supplier performance for G&G software applications that include geologic interpretational software, seismic interpretational software, petrophysical, advanced geophysical, reservoir modeling, and many others, along with taking a deep dive into the technology and digital trends such as machine learning, cloud, and others. We'll be looking at the competitive landscape and these technology trends. We'll be looking at the performance of both the small and the large providers in this space. Feel free to submit questions during the presentation. You can submit them through the chat box. You can email them to us directly, and we'll address your questions as we go through the presentation. For those of you that are not familiar with Kimberlite Research, I'll provide a brief background and dive right on in. Each year, Kimberlite Research conducts about 3,000 one-on-one interviews with customers and users of oilfield services worldwide. Some of you on the webinar may have participated in one of our industry surveys and interviews, and for that, we thank you if you've done that. Our research is about 50% North America and 50% international. We'll produce a series of reports ranging from formation evaluation and drilling, completion, production, subsea. Today, like I talked about, we'll be covering the G&G software applicational domains highlighted here in yellow: geologic, seismic, petrophysical, advanced geophysical, depth velocity, depth imaging, seismic data processing software, and reservoir modeling. The findings and results today are based on one-on-one interviews with over 200 E&P operators globally. The data set is very rich and multidimensional. In this exhibit, we cross-plot supplier performance on the x-axis against pricing competitiveness on the y-axis. This value map, as we call it, is something that we'll be using quite a bit today. So just real quick, top right is the premium supplier quadrant, cost more but worth it. Bottom right, value advantaged. Bottom left, discount provider, underperform, low price, get what you pay for. The fair value fairway runs diagonally, northeast down to southwest. And any suppliers in the top left-hand quadrant, from the voice of the operators, are viewed as underperforming and not a good value proposition. So we're basically collecting the voice of you, the operators, oil and gas operators from around the world. So with that, let's dive in. So one of the first questions that we ask the E&P operators is, what technologies are really making the most difference to your operations? What's the next big thing? And what we find is machine learning is right at the top of the list. So we collect hundreds of verbatim comments and feedback from the operators, and machine learning and AI is right at the top of the list. In 2018, it really wasn't present. 2020, it made the top of the list. In 22, it remains at the top of the list. When you take a look where the geoscientists are spending their time, we'll find that most of the geoscientists are spending their time with development activities, exploration, and only 4% with energy transition activities. So this is something to kind of keep in mind where the time is being spent with our geoscience community around the world. You can also see that the preponderance of the North America operators are involved in unconventional. International, it's mostly conventional plays, and then offshore and internationally, there's carbonate plays. When you take a look at G&G software expenditures by the oil and gas operators around the world, 60% of oil and gas operators are trying to keep their budgets flat for G&G software, and another 35% expect their expenditures for G&G software to increase. You can see that the national oil companies are probably trying to catch up the fastest from underinvestment in this space. When you look at the diffusion index for G&G software, it is relatively steady, doesn't have quite the volatility that you see with drilling services and production services. Moving into some of the digital and energy transition type technologies, what we find is that about 49% or half of the oil and gas operators worldwide are planning to increase their expenditures for ESG expenses moving forward, and the other half to hold the expenses flat. Most of the ESG spending, however, is being invested in emissions monitoring and reduction, followed by carbon capture. When you look at the oil companies' investment plans for new energy investments, carbon capture is really the only area in which major oil companies, independent oil companies, and national oil companies are all equally interested in wanting to pursue that at the top of the list. Major oil companies tend to take the lead on many of these other areas, be it solar, wind, or geothermal. Many, about 40%, 30–40% of the oil and gas operators worldwide believe that their G&G software applications can be transferred over to these new energy transitions. Again, we mentioned only about 4% of the geoscientists' time is spent here, but they do believe that G&G interpretation, seismic data processing, reservoir engineering, and drilling software, engineering software, are very applicable for carbon capture projects and geothermal projects moving forward. When we move digitally, what we find is most oil companies would self-describe themselves as having a defined digital strategy for G&G technology, but they're going to go about it in different ways. About 1/3 of the oil companies will adopt an industry standard platform. Another third will build it in-house, and about another third or more will partner with oilfield service companies like Halliburton, Schlumberger, and others, or with cloud providers such as Microsoft, Google, and Amazon. When you look at all the technologies that are being used by the oil and gas operators worldwide for geoscience workflows, clearly due to COVID, remote working and mobility technologies are very highly used, most currently at 70%, expected to remain high. But you can see how machine learning, although it's only being used currently by about 34% of geoscientists worldwide, is expected to grow to 70% in 2 years. So again, that talks to the machine learning AI that I mentioned at the beginning of this webinar. Data analytics, high performance compute, and cloud computing are all expected to increase in use moving forward. Major oil companies tend to be the biggest driver in driving the adoption of these digital technologies. AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning algorithms are being embedded and used in seismic interpretation at the greatest level today, followed by geologic interpretation, reservoir modeling, and seismic data processing software. The adoption and use of AI being deployed with these applicational domains is expected to increase. 81% of the time, oil and gas operators prefer the AI to be embedded directly into the software. Oil and gas operators are experiencing tremendous challenges in implementing AI, largely around data management and structure inputs, coupled with, hey, it's new, a lot to learn, limited capabilities, limited budgets, a lot to balance. But I think these challenges will be overcome, and the implementation and adoption of AI and data analytics science will continue to prevail. In fact, oil and gas operators believe that AI will complement about 38% of their software applications and perhaps displace about 13% of their software applications. Oil and gas operators say that about 1 in 4, 26% of their geoscientists globally, are in fact being upskilled and trained with analytics data science skill sets. So again, this kind of reaffirms the commitment that will drive the future adoption for AI and machine learning. When we asked the oil and gas operators which platforms are they going to make greatest use of, they mentioned Schlumberger Delphi most commonly. The major oil companies tend to be a little bit more split between Halliburton, Decision Space 365, and Schlumberger Delphi. But amongst independents and national oil companies, Schlumberger Delphi clearly has the mindshare lead as the platform of choice for AI enablement for the future. Compatibility with independent software vendors remains highly important for oil and gas operators globally, and GPU enablement and support remains very important to oil and gas operators globally. When oil and gas operators share their G&G interpretational results internally with their colleagues, they principally will share that within the software itself, followed by email and use of corporate database. Moving to cloud computing, many people really underestimated the adoption rate for cloud computing because it did start out very slowly for a number of reasons. And so if you go back to 2018, only 17% of the geoscience community globally actually was using the cloud to access any G&G applications. And at the time, it was only 7% of their applications being accessed. You fast forward from 18 to 20, you saw very slow adoption from 17% using it to 22%. And the number of applications only increased from 7% to 10%. But from 2020 to 2022, we start to see the rate of increase in adoption increasing at an increasing rate. We now go from 22% users up to about 44% or so. And the percent of applications being accessed from the cloud jumped from 10% to 17%. If you look at the projections amongst the oil and gas operators, they're projecting up to 63% of users will be using the cloud in 2 years, in 2024. And we'll start to see as much as maybe a third of software applications being accessed from the cloud. Remains to be seen, but it's very clear that I think we've turned the corner on cloud use and adoption here. Microsoft is clearly the leader cloud vendor for the oil and gas community, followed by Amazon and Google. Microsoft stepped out, took the early lead. They've never relinquished the lead, and it's unlikely that Amazon and Google will catch up. Oil and gas operators indicate that they, in terms of managing the software in the cloud, they're rather split, about almost 45-55, managing it themselves or relying upon the software vendor to manage it. But when it comes to managing the data for the G&G applications in the cloud, it's very clear, almost 75-25, that the oil companies will manage that data themselves. When you take a look at the cost of moving to the cloud, I think one of the things that really delayed the adoption was it took time for the oil companies to recognize that, look, when you move to a fully vendor-managed cloud-based solution, all that IT support is now being transferred over to your cloud vendor. And so you're going to have to pay more for that than you would for just a simple G&G software license and related maintenance. In 2020, about 32% of operators worldwide didn't think they'd have to pay more for a cloud-based solution, but you fast forward to 2022, and 82% of operators do realize that, look, it's going to cost more, it's going to displace legacy costs that they normally would pay. And so I think the world is moving to a more practical understanding as to what's happening here. So it will cost more to move to a vendor-managed cloud-based solution, but the oil companies need to relinquish that legacy cost that they have. Oil and gas operators prefer a monthly fixed price, nearly 70 to 30, on cloud services versus consumption-based pricing. We included a new section on Open Subsurface Data Universe, OSDU. It's been talked about for about 10 years, it seems, in the industry. Unfortunately, 82% of the geoscience community globally is not familiar with it. It's really the major oil companies that are active members in helping to shape OSDU. It's envisioned that if OSDU begins to be more formally adopted down in the future, that it will provide benefits of data management and access. But right now, there's just so many stumbling blocks with technology maturity, understanding of what it is, and budgetary constraints. Like I shared with you earlier, 60% of oil companies are trying to keep their budgets flat if they can. But it is anticipated to provide benefits in the future should it be adopted and implemented for G&G interpretation and seismic data processing, reservoir engineering, information evaluation the most. I'm going to transition gears. When you start to take a look at who are the leaders in G&G software application and technology, when we ask all of the oil and gas operators globally, who do you associate as the leader for technology leadership? Oil and gas operators can mention whoever supplier they would like, regardless if they use them or not, and they can mention multiple suppliers. And so we capture this raw data and we apply Kimberlite analytics to kind of build a profile, if you will, as to what that brand image or what that market image is for each of the major G&G software suppliers. So when I jump ahead to these profiles, we'll start first with Schlumberger. These positive correlations indicate that Schlumberger's leadership, their brand image in the marketplace, for technology leadership, cloud leadership, data integration leadership, machine learning, AI leadership, best for unconventional plays, best for conventional plays. Each year, Schlumberger's image of leadership technologically extends beyond their customer base. There are more geoscience folks out there in the world that associate Schlumberger as the leader on these technologies capabilities than Schlumberger actually has users. So clearly, dominant position from a market share position for Schlumberger. Where Schlumberger is perhaps a little bit more challenged is if you start adding best value for the money and too high price, hard to justify, then that starts to come into play. But we're going to talk more about that because in some cases, Schlumberger is viewed as costing more money, but worth it because they deliver better performance than everyone else. In other cases, people challenge that value proposition. And so we'll talk more about that. When you start to take a look at Halliburton, for example, when you look at the 0% line right here, what this is talking about is, and you're coming into the 0% line, it means that Halliburton's customers see them very favorably on this factor, but non-customers don't associate Halliburton as being a leader on these factors. And so Halliburton's leadership and brand image for technology leadership is certainly increasing every year, so that's a very good positive for them, as well as for conventional plays. When you start to take a look at best value for the money and too high price, hard to justify, Halliburton's pricing strategies around the world have created this bimodal distribution where some people see them as a value player, some people see them as too high price, not delivering good value. And we'll talk more about that in a moment as well. When you take a look at IHS, you can see that IHS, who bought SMT Kingdom, principally designed for North America operators, unconventional shale, great package. IHS bought those packages many years ago. Overall customer satisfaction quickly declined. But they've done a better job most recently to try to improve that. We'll talk more about that. But overall, IHS has some very significant brand image deficits. They're certainly not viewed as a leader for AI and machine learning. They're not viewed as a leader for cloud-based applications. They're not viewed as a technology leader. They are viewed as being a good value. So you get what you pay for when you go to IHS. LMKR, they're known as a discount provider. They're not really viewed as a technology leader. When you take a look at Paradigm, which is part of Emerson, that as of Monday this week is now part of Aspen Tech, they too have some brand image deficits dealing with machine learning, cloud-based applications, and data integration and technology. And so they too have some obstacles to overcome. Will be interesting to kind of follow what happens with Emerson Paradigm, which has some good capabilities. We'll see what happens in the future under Aspen Tech. Geo Software, it's a new name. Historically, it was Hanson Russell under CGG and Fugo Jason Workbench that was also under CGG. We sold the Constellation software up in Canada most recently, up under the Vela sub-brand. So again, the Geo Software customers see strong strengths. They have brand image deficits with AI and best for unconventional. Be interesting to see what transforms there. Down under Geo Solutions out of Perth, Australia, a new player. They're a value-based provider. They have brand image deficits for cloud as well as for unconventional plays. So when you summarize up the overall landscape for market image on technologies, Schlumberger is the clear leader and is expected to continue to drive the future for AI enablement and digital technologies in advanced data science, followed in second position by Halliburton. Emerson, now part of Aspen Tech, IHS, Geo Software, part of Constellation Software, and LMKR are really going to probably be more secondary providers in the market in terms of technology leadership, and probably be more in a trying to maximize their cash flow and maximize the investments that they've made to date. So we're going to want to monitor this moving forward. And so for those of you that participate in our surveys and give you and provide your experiences from a user base, the use of the operator, the use of the geoscience community with these packages, we certainly appreciate that. Let's transition gears now, and let's go into which packages are used most often: geologic, seismic, petrophysical. And you can see about 30 to 40% of the geoscience community would like to see improvements in these software applicational packages, principally in data integration, capability, functionality, and accuracy and reliability of the data. When we start to take a look at the overview of these suppliers, what we find is that Schlumberger has the deepest market penetration. Most of the major oil companies and national oil companies use them. 3/4 of the large independents use them, but very few small independents use them. Halliburton's use is principally amongst national oil companies, followed by majors. And IHS and LMKR are principally used by the independent oil companies globally. Emerson, now AspenTech, GeoSoftware, Lloyd's Register for petrophysical software, Icon, each have a pretty consistent presence in the market at about 10%. When we take a look at Schlumberger's performance as a supplier, you see that Schlumberger is in this top right-hand quadrant. Generally speaking, they live up to their market image of costing more money but worth it. Their pricing strategies are slightly out of alignment with their performance profile. We'll talk more about that in a moment. The performance of their software applicational packages are rather consistent. Their customer loyalty rating, as measured by the Net Promoter Score, tends to be higher than industry average. Where Schlumberger is being challenged is principally in the North America market, where the value proposition is being challenged, where North America oil and gas operators are challenging the performance and the experience and the outcomes that they're receiving with these software packages and the price they're paying. And they're finding that perhaps it's maybe not the very best. For reservoir modeling, though, and for seismic data processing, Schlumberger is delivering very strong value in North America. When you move internationally, the international operators clearly see Schlumberger as more of that more consistent, cost more but worth it supplier. Certainly, Schlumberger's performance would be nice if it was a little bit further over to the right, but this is still a very strong showing. When you take a look at Halliburton, Halliburton's performance has consistently underperformed the market from 16 to 18 to 20, and Halliburton improved their competitive positioning by being more aggressive on pricing and adjusting their pricing strategies to be more aligned with their performance profile to get back into this fair value fairway that we talk about. Now, from 2020 to 2022, Halliburton's making some very positive strides. They're improving their overall performance, and they're maintaining strong value. Their customer loyalty ratings here at the bottom of the screen that have traditionally lagged and fell below the industry average have been improving. While they're not quite on par with industry norm just yet, they're closing that gap and converging. Halliburton, very similarly to Schlumberger, is being challenged on many of their applicational packages in the North America market, particularly with reservoir modeling and seismic data processing software like Promax. Their strengths tend to be in their petrophysical software, which I think they're in collaboration with Lloyd's Register, which would explain why their petrophysical software is viewed more favorably there. Because Lloyd's Register is a very strong petrophysical software package. When you move internationally, Halliburton's value and performance is viewed far more favorably amongst the international oil and gas operators, and they're really kind of viewed as a value-based alternative to Schlumberger that's sitting right above them. When you look at Emerson, which is now part of AspenTech, what you find is that the users of Paradigm, which is Emerson, now AspenTech, but the legacy Paradigm users see great value in all the technologies that they use. And so it'll be interesting to see under the new AspenTech ownership if they're able to maintain this value performance advantage. Many oil companies will go to Paradigm for help when they believe that perhaps Schlumberger or Halliburton isn't able to give them the time and attention that they would like to have. When you take a look at IHS, we talked about this. When they purchased S&T Kingdom, who was in the bottom right-hand quadrant of this value map, customer experience and performance levels dramatically declined very quickly as they had lots of difficulties integrating their geologic interpretational software, Petra, with that of S&T Kingdom. Lots of unhappy users, lots of support issues, and so they really kind of languished for quite some time. But IHS has really improved their performance and currently, based on the reviews of their customers that use them, they're delivering about industry average or slightly below industry average performance, and their pricing competitiveness seems to be on par with industry norm. Their weakest attributes are what we talked about earlier. They're not really viewed as a technology leader and nor expected to become one. Their weakest packages are petrophysical and reservoir modeling. Some of their stronger packages were seismic interpretation, which is really kind of the bread and butter, if you will, of S&T Kingdom. Petra is over here with geologic interpretation. When you take a look at LMKR, they're very consistently viewed as a discount provider, commonly used by the small to medium-sized oil companies in North America and by some of the smaller consulting shops. Affordable, easy to use, maybe not industry-leading technology, but like I said, you get good value for what you pay for. Remember the fair value fairway: pay more, get more; pay less, get less. You take a look at Lloyd's Register. They're almost every year consistently viewed as a value advantaged and one of the best petrophysical software packages out there, particularly amongst independents. However, obviously in the COVID years from 2020 to 2022, you can see that their training, technical support, and follow-up kind of fell behind as they really weren't able to travel and get out there. Ease of use of the product is extreme, very high, very affordable. I would expect this profile to change in 2024 when we update the report, now that we're all back to travel and living our daily lives more normally now. Geo software that we mentioned earlier, the old Hampton Russell, CGG, and Fugler Jason Workbench, now been sold to Constellation Software up in Canada, part of the Vela. You can see that traditionally they were viewed as a value advantage supplier. They kind of moved in a negative direction from 2020 to 22 due to COVID and the ownership transition. We'll be following this closely. Hopefully Hampton Russell can continue to be a good leader in the market for what they provide. Down Under Geo Solutions, relatively new entrant into the marketplace, consistently viewed as delivering the best overall value. Granted, they don't really have a large customer base just yet, but their penetration is growing. And those that use Down Under Geo Solutions are finding some good value there. I think as an oil company, you're going to have to look at what your real needs are in terms of technology, and then kind of look for fit for purpose software solutions to meet your needs. Down Under Geo Solutions is also known fairly well for their seismic data processing software and capabilities as well. CGG, like I said, they sold off much of their other software packages, but they maintained depth imaging, depth velocity, and seismic data processing software, and traditionally they've been viewed as a value advantage. They did take a negative turn in 22, so we'll be monitoring to see if CGG kind of regains their step going into 24. As you know, CGG is a leader when it comes to third-party seismic data processing, and they also have marine multi-client data libraries as well. Icon Geoscience, kind of a specialty niche provider, typically value advantaged. So that's kind of an overview, if you will, of the overall geologic interpretation on in software. Just for those of you that are on the webinar, if you're interested more in a particular applicational domain, I will use geologic interpretational software as an example. Kimberlite, we have great details as to which suppliers are being used for each of these packages. Like Lloyd's Register has recently come out with a geologic interpretational package, which we really haven't spoke about very much. You can see that the oil and gas operators have really consolidated their packages down to about 1.4. They no longer have 2 or 3 different geologic interpretational packages. When you look at the performance ratings of these various suppliers on a scale of 1 to 10 on these 7 performance measures, it's very clear not every supplier is performing at the same level. And so it's very clear that you as an oil and gas operator diligence when you're evaluating various software packages. Thanks to the gift of the feedback of the oil and gas operators globally, we update this study every 2 years, 2016, 18, 20, and 22. We have probably 60,000 supplier performance ratings or performance ratings on the suppliers across all of these domains that we can very objectively benchmark, if you will, overall supplier performance. Like the dash line, is the whole industry getting better? Is the whole industry going down? And so forth. And so we can track all this for each of the suppliers, and then we can eventually displace it over to the value map that we talked about. And so like North America, the competitive landscape of these suppliers looks quite a bit differently than, say, international. And so we have this for each of the various applicational domains. For today's presentation, I elected to kind of go through the performance summaries because I felt like in the sake of time and to respect your time, taking the time to be on this particular call, that we would focus on the overall performance summaries where you could take a look at where they were on each of their domains by region, international and North America. So with that, we've hit the bottom of the hour. I'm going to see if we have any questions. There's some questions about, see a question about all the dynamics and changes that we talked about on Schlumberger, Halliburton, and the Geo software and the ownership changes. And you know, as an oil and gas operator, I think you really need to pay attention to the fact that it's true, Schlumberger is the leader in technology and the G&G software space. It's true they charge a lot more money, and a lot of oil and gas operators really don't have the budgets to use a Schlumberger. It will be interesting to see how some of these other software packages, like Hampton Russell, that's now part of Constellation Software up in Canada. Constellation Software is like a billion-dollar company with software that ranges from amusement parks to every vertical in the economy, right? And oh yes, and now they have G&G software. I don't know if they're really going to apply the science. I think they're just going to milk those packages. Fortunately for the oil and gas operators, Hampton Russell, Frugo, Jason's a pretty strong package that even if they don't support it with additional advancement in technology and support, you know, it's probably capable of continuing to support the oil and gas operators for several years into the future. So it's hard when you have companies like Constellation Software and others that are so broad in software that they may not understand some of the more detailed technical issues that we're trying to solve with velocity analysis and velocity models. And again, that goes back to each oil company having to do their due diligence, if you will, as to which package is really most appropriate. We have the data here at Kimberlite, you know, to help identify which software packages are viewed as being best, if you will, for carbonates versus conventional versus unconventional. We ask that you reach out to us if you need to delve into this more deeply. We also have information on wireline logging and logging while drilling and surface logging. So keep that in mind. And we also have coverage for many other areas if your colleagues in your oil company are interested in drilling technologies or completion technologies or artificial lift and production technologies. Feel free to reach out to discuss. I think that covers what we'd like to address today, and I'd like to thank you for your time and for attending the Kimberlite webinar for G&G software and digital and technology trends. Thank you very much. Bye now.